Greetings, brothers and sisters. JoJo's got his finger out again. So I pulled up two clips this morning looking for. My wife told me about the, where he said in the earlier video I made today that we the people is the government. So I knew I had to make a video on that because, that's an epic gaffe. So I was searching for that, and YouTube pulled up two clips, and in one it had the, what I was looking for. And the second one, it had JoJo thinks he's going to cure cancer. And this is another epic gaffe. So let's get started here. So I just want to clarify here. I'm in the editing process. I'm using the word gaffe, and probably that isn't the correct word because these are actually scripted points that are so, mistaken, right? So ridiculous that they're like gaffes, but they're, intentional. Like he has written this speech with gaffes in it, in the speech itself.
Mr. Secretary, that's less than 1%. China and other countries are closing in fast. We have to develop and dominate the products and technologies of the future.
Dominate is not a good word. Dominate's a big word in America, but it's not a word in terms of being a spiritual person that should be used. Dominating implies abuse.
Advanced batteries, biotechnology, computer chips, clean energy. The Secretary of Defense can tell you, and those of you who work in national security issues know, the Defense Department has an agency called DARPA.
Oh boy. He's bringing up DARPA. So most of you know that DARPA has done a lot of things that the truth community has been reporting on. And when anything's associated with DARPA, it is usually considered bad within, alternative media reporting.
The Defense Advanced Research Project Agency. The people who set up before I came here, and that's been a long time ago, to develop breakthroughs that enhance our national security. That's their only job. And it's a semi-separate agency. It's under the Defense Department.
So I'm editing this. I did this part yesterday, but this morning JoJo did an interview with the Today Show that was put out. And I point this out where JoJo is now in the habit of touching his face in this manner because of wearing masks. So remember this because I'm going to show it again in the interview. This is his new sort of, one of the tics he's developed from mask wearing.
It's led to everything from the discovery of the internet to GPS and so much more.
So the Defense Department has created the internet, which we know, and GPS tracking. So the Defense Department has found a way to track all your data. All these things are coming out of DARPA, right? The internet, knowing everything about you and track where you go in terms of GPS, right? And so this was developed by National Security Agency, a private one, and all of us now are using these things. So this should cause suspicion in people. Where are you going with this, JoJo? Again, I'm in the editing process here, and I want to make this clear because this is something that most of us know but don't really think about in the truth community. And then most Americans don't know this. That DARPA, which is a, nefarious agency that is part of the Defense Department, but it's private, so it doesn't get the kind of scrutiny other agencies get. And they do controversial experiments and so many, things that are not good. And they developed the internet and GPS, right? And so the internet wasn't developed by private businesses. It wasn't developed by, some communications agency of the government. It was developed by the Defense Department so that they would have access to our data because internet is, a Defense Department initiative that's been controlled by the National Security Agency. And so that's the internet and GPS. So they're using all of that information, that they're gathering from us against us because it isn't, a pro-citizen agency. It's an agency that's about defending America. And just think about that, right? and JoJo's admitting it here, that DARPA, a private agency working with the NSA or for the NSA, has developed these things that all of us are now completely, helplessly dependent on and serving up our data, and they're collecting it, right? To use against the people in a way to defend the beastly system. And he's just telling everybody, yeah, that's what this has done. And he's using that as, oh, wow, this is great. So what can they do for medicine?
And it's a semi-separate agency. It's under the Defense Department. It's led to everything from the discovery of the internet to GPS and so much more. It's enhanced our security. The National Institute of Health, the NIH, I believe, should create a similar advanced research projects agency for health.
So you want a DARPA-like agency running our healthcare agencies, which many people are already suspicious of. Look at Kamala's weird necklace here. I didn't notice it before. It's got like pearl-like things. It's open here. It's not a choker like Nancy's got on. What's Nancy got on? I'm not a fashionista, but I think these things are odd.
And that would hear.
Woo! He has a DARPA-like agency for healthcare. Woo! National security for healthcare. Woo!
What it would do. It would have a singular purpose: to develop breakthroughs to prevent, detect, and treat diseases like Alzheimer's, diabetes, and cancer.
Kamala went for a clap, but she was a little premature. Watch right here.
Detect and treat diseases like Alzheimer's, diabetes, and cancer. I'll still never forget when we passed the cancer proposal in the last year as vice president. Almost
Sounds like you're almost forgetting it right now.
$9 million going to NIH. And they've excused the point of personal privilege. I'll never forget you standing, Mitch, and saying, name it after my deceased son. It meant a lot. But so many of us have deceased sons, daughters, and relatives who died of cancer. I can think of no more worthy investment. I know of nothing that is more bipartisan. So let's end cancer as we know it. It's within our power. It's within our power to do it.
What are you talking about, bro? This is watch this. Let's listen to this again while.
I know of nothing that is more bipartisan.
Look at him.
So let's end cancer as we know it.
Let's end cancer,
it's
folks.
It's within our power. Woo! It's within our power to do it.
Look at the woo! Standing ovation. He's going to end cancer, JoJo, with a DARPA-like agency for healthcare. JoJo's ending cancer. He's going to end it. Cancer's over, you guys. He's getting rid of it. Let's do it. Let's just do it, folks. Let's get rid of cancer. What about the cancer on your soul, bro? The fact that got a standing ovation from both the Republicans and the Democrats. Oh, I'm not going to sit. Cancer, yes, let's end it. Woo! Right? They're not going to sit down when everyone else is standing. When they're talking about curing cancer, we know they're not going to cure cancer. They know they're not going to cure cancer. They know JoJo. They know JoJo isn't, this is just some ridiculous thing they do at these State of the Unions to pump everybody up. This what is it? A pep rally, right? Pep rally for America. But, there was somebody who was talking about going to Mars, right? Who was that? Was that Bush or was that, I don't know who that was. They all come out with these things that never happen. Let's cure cancer, folks. Gosh darn it, we can do it. Woo, yeah, cancer, woo. So, so I made this video yesterday, and the first part you just watched. And I was going to finish it last night, but there was a meditative sitting for the Heartfulness Gathering that I'm doing. And it's hard for me to, there's just this subtle refinement that goes with the heartfulness system. It brings someone up to a higher level of consciousness. It elevates one's, spiritual condition and their thoughts and things. And it's always hard for me to descend down from that to, cover things and do my job or whatever it is here. But, and it's also really hard for me to care about it. Like, I don't care usually, but I care even less now, especially after good sittings in the heartfulness system. So JoJo did an interview this morning, or they put it out this morning. So he blames Trump, and, he's got an interesting quote about masks. And so, this guy, look at how clueless he is, right? I mean, this confused expression on his face, you often see it. It's like cruelty in a way to put this guy out there and then pretend that, gaslighting America and pretending that this isn't weird, right? And so let me finish up with this cancer thing. So it's very laughable, this idea of curing cancer, because our system is a cancer on the world. Right now, human beings are a cancer on the planet. We're doing things to the planet. We're one species among millions of living species on this planet that is doing the most destruction and behaving in an unnatural way. Even though we're at the top of the food chain and we have like the most intellectual capacity, we're the ones who are screwing up the planet the most. And even it extends beyond Earth on a spiritual level. And so we are messing with the vibrations. And our system is a cancerous system. It's a selfish system, right? The idea of cancer, malignant cells going against the host, is something that is a reflection of what human beings are doing. And so if you look at this right here, you have heart disease, which kills an average of 650,000 people a year, and cancer that kills 600,000 people a year. Now, they're going to say that COVID is up there with, 500,000 people now. But in reality, a lot of those deaths were these things right here. They were, pre-existing conditions, and they're just calling them COVID deaths to maximize the numbers. We've known that. Most of us know that already. But the reason why people die from cancer is because there is carcinogens, there is unnatural elements, things that cause cancer in our environment. We eat it, people breathe it in. It's, carcinogens are things that also affect heart disease, right? So there are poisonous foods, poisonous, side effects from medicines, and there's addictions and things that people have. I mean, there's all these things that cause cancer. Pollutants in the environment, whatever it might be. And so those things have to be removed from the environment, and people have to eat healthy foods and live healthy lifestyles and have healthy thoughts. And, there's a spiritual aspect to this, because the same things that are causing cancer are also causing heart disease. And the people who run the healthcare system don't have a problem with that, right? They don't have a problem with the foods because they never say anything about it. There's no, Fauci coming out and saying you got to eat healthy, you got to boost your immune system. When this thing happened with COVID, when it first came out, and I had said this before in earlier videos, everybody should be working on boosting their immune system. There's things to support your immune system out there, and your immune system is everything in terms of allergies, in terms of, everything that's toxic in the environment. And so boosting your immune system, a true healer would say that's job number one, because you have an immune system that's there to fight off all of these things. And people with healthy immune systems, young people particularly, aren't having nearly as much problems with COVID. I mean, it's not even, an issue for them. But that's not what our healthcare system does. The allopathic medicine isn't there to boost people's immune system. It's there to keep people semi-sick and dependent on the healthcare system. It creates customers, right? You have all these young people. I did a video on this maybe 2 years ago. If you just Google this, young people with chronic diseases, chronic conditions, and most young people have one, and and many of them have two chronic conditions, healthcare conditions. And so you see this, they're good customers. If you are somebody who always has poor health, you're a good customer, and you have, you're weaker, and you're going to be more dependent on the system. You're going to be less rebellious and things like this. When you're sick, it sucks the fight out of you. And so people who are sick are easier to control. And that's our healthcare system. But so JoJo says he's going to get rid of cancer. Well, we have to change everything about our society to get rid of cancer. Like we have a cancerous attitude, a cancer-causing attitude, and our system is cancerous in itself, right? It's a malignant growth that is unnatural in nature. And so with that, let's go to this interview.
Are you going to be one of these folks now? We're no longer going to see the President of the United States outside with the mask on?
Sure. I mean, but what I'm going to do, though, because the likelihood of my being able to be outside and people not come up to me is not very, very high.
He has developed this tic now where he is touching his face. He did this in the State of the Union because he's used to wearing a mask when he talks in public. And so he's used to grabbing his mask. I've made videos about how much he grabs his mask right by his ghoul hole, which is the worst place to be touching it because that's where all the COVID juice is, right? And so he's developed this tic of touching his mask, and now when he doesn't wear a mask, he does it to his face. He did it again. You can see my other video. I covered this. There is, he did this a couple times during the small part I watched of his, State of the Union speech.
That people not come up to me is not very, very high. So it's like, look, you and I took our masks off.
Wait, watch this guy's face. I didn't get to stop it.
Not come up to me is not very.
He's like, please, right? Melvin, I think this guy's name is. He's not, he's not saying it, but he's looking at JoJo like, come on, bro. Like, I can't believe I'm sitting here interviewing you and you're the president.
Very high. So it's like, look, you and I took our masks off when I came in because look at the distance we are. But if we were, in fact, sitting there talking to one another close, I'd have my mask on and I bet you'd have a mask on.
So this is from the CDC Public Health Guidelines for Community-Related Exposure. It was updated on March 1st on 2021. So it's been updated recently, and this is, been around forever. I know about it. JoJo should know about it. Individual who has close contact within 6 feet for a total of 15 minutes or more. That's when you're supposed to get COVID, right? And it says here, this is irrespective of whether a person with COVID-19 or the contact was wearing a mask or whether the contact was wearing respiratory personal protective equipment, PPE. So this is from the CDC website, and what they're saying is that if you have COVID or you're sitting with somebody who has COVID and you're within 6 feet and you are sitting together for 15 minutes, masks make no difference at all. Masks don't have any effect on that interaction. And so, why would masks have an effect on any interaction? Like, it just doesn't make any sense scientifically. But either way, they're saying the way to get COVID, you're considered a person who is at high risk in terms of this contact tracing. If they find out that somebody you were with had COVID, like you didn't know, they didn't know, but you were sitting with them for 15 minutes and you were within 6 feet, then it's likely that you have it, at least you have it in your system in some way or another. And so JoJo should know this. What he said is just wrong. Let's go back to it.
I came in because look at the distance we are. But if we were, in fact, sitting there talking to one another close, I'd have my mask on and I bet you'd have a mask, even though we've both been vaccinated.
But that doesn't matter, right? The masks don't matter. Like he just said, the masks matter, but they don't. It says by the CDC guideline, they don't matter, JoJo. Like this is the CDC. So this is JoJo again saying things that aren't backed by the CDC. If they were within 15 feet, if they were within 6 feet, they're going to talk for more than 15 minutes here, then masks make no difference. But that's not why it's also going to get into the Giuliani raid, which I'm interested to hear about. But then so Melvin asked him about the 4 crises he laid out in his speech, and then he says this.
Immigration was not one of the crises that demanded urgent action in January. Does it demand urgent action now? Is what's happening at the southern border, is it a crisis?
It is getting urgent action now. For example, a month ago, we had thousands of young kids in custody in places they shouldn't be and controlled by the Border Patrol. We have now cut that down dramatically. Here's what happened, Craig. The failure to have a real transition, the two departments that didn't give us access to virtually anything were the Immigration and the Defense Department. So we didn't find out they had fired a whole lot of people, that they were understaffed considerably.
So JoJo's blaming Trump, and I want to talk about this. I've been wanting to talk about this since, like a couple weeks ago. I haven't had the opportunity. It's not Melvin, it's Craig. Is it Craig Melvin? I don't know. I thought his name was Melvin.
But in April alone, Mr. President, 170,000 people, migrants, apprehended at the border. It's a 20-year record. There are 22,000 unaccompanied children in our country right now. That's a record. That sounds to most folks like a crisis.
Well, look, it's way down now. We've now gotten control. For example, they didn't plan for, which it comes every year, this flow, whether it's 22,000 or 10,000. They didn't have the beds that were available. They didn't.
It's not about beds. It's about people coming across the border, right? People coming across the border illegally. That's the crisis. I mean, yeah. Your treatment of them is part of it. They're people that were suffering being in overpacked facilities, but building bigger facilities doesn't stop the problem of people coming into the country illegally, right? But there's something else here I want to say. Look at it. He just always is he's a mess, this guy, right? Just confused. Looks like a deer in the headlights.
Plan for the overflow. They didn't plan for the Department of Health and Human Services to have places to take the kid from the Border Patrol and put them in beds where there was security and there were people that could take care of them. So there's a significant change right now. Significant change in the circumstance for children coming to and at the border.
So the problem, which is never going to go away, they say it's seasonal, right? So this is going to happen every year because what he campaigned on, what JoJo campaigned on was Trump was an inhuman monster. And people who are in other countries who are also suffering because of the COVID policies pushed by the media and by JoJo's campaign. Because they wanted to make it look like Trump was failing on COVID, so they maximized closing down society. I mean, there's all these things that both the media and the Biden campaign pushed, closing down businesses, closing down, shutting down, locking down, right? And that was done globally. And because of that, people in poor countries that didn't have any margin, right, they're already suffering, are suffering even worse. So you have these countries who didn't have the ability to export whatever they make, whatever they produce, and so they all are under economic issues. Everyone's having economic problems, but the poor countries more than anybody else. And so you have people who are desperate, right? I mean, you think about, as a parent, if you are, going to give all your money to a coyote, somebody who is, a criminal, right? Somebody who is potentially, going to sell your kid to, I mean, who knows what that person's going to do with your kid, right? And at the very best, they're going to take the kid across a desert. I mean, there's people coming up from Guatemala and these other countries, Honduras, and they're coming up from these countries in South and Central America, walking all the way through the Mexican desert and then into America illegally. And these are like, 9, 10-year-old kids, 16-year-old kids. So if you're a parent and you're so desperate that you give all your money to one of these coyotes or send your kid on their own to walk across the desert because life is so hopeless for that kid, I mean, you're so desperate, then, there's nothing that's going to stop you from doing that, because whatever you're living through in your region, your area, especially now post-COVID, is a horror show. And so for JoJo, when he campaigned as being a humanitarian and not like Trump, all these people were like, well, Trump is, a bad guy. And they were still sending their kids through the border, right? Trump is after them, like people who are sending their kids or who are trying to come across the border. His policies were anti people coming to America, right, through this process. He wanted to build a wall. He campaigned on it. And then when you have a guy who comes out and says, no, he's, a nice guy. I mean, that was part of the whole rhetoric. He's a nice guy. This guy isn't like Trump at all. And Trump might be back in 4 years or somebody like him. This is our opportunity. And so that's never going to end because that's what they believe, right? The people in these other countries, they don't have access to these interviews and, they don't speak the language. And so they just, they hear that Biden's basically opening the border and he's pro-immigration. He's pro-people coming in. And after Trump, they're going to be like, all right, let's go. And that you can't stop that, right? Because that's their perception. And so there's always going to be a flood of people coming across the border. And so they can build more facilities so there's more beds and they get treated better when they get here. But that's, going to cause an economic issue here, right? That's going to break down the economy. So this guy, who is blaming Trump, remember he was saying he was such a straight shooter and that he would take responsibility for his actions. But the way he campaigned, the way that he demonized Trump about immigration, the way that he made himself as being more of a humanitarian, set up this situation we're in now, that he's in now. And it has nothing to do with Trump or anybody else, right? It has to do with his rhetoric. And so when you, put that message out there that you're open to people coming here and that you're more sympathetic and empathetic to their situation and you're going to, allow them to come in, then you're going to have more and more people coming. It's just that simple. And him not taking responsibility for it.
So there's a significant change right now, significant change in the circumstance for children coming to and at the border.
During the campaign, you pledged to reunite hundreds of children who
Yes.
have been separated from their parents by the previous administration. According to our reporting, in your first 100 days, not one child's been reunited.
I don't think that.
How is that?
I don't think that's true, but that could be. What we have.
I don't think that's true. It could be, but why don't you know? Why does he know and you don't, right? I don't think that's true, but it might be. I don't know. Like, I don't know, maybe you should ask somebody who's in authority or something. It's your job to know. Like, he's distanced himself from the crisis. He sent Kamala over there who didn't want anything to do with it, right? And so this is a complete debacle. And this is, it's beyond whether these people that come here, these kids come here, are treated fairly and humanely. It's about a, flow of people into our country that's illegal, right? That isn't backed by the immigration system. They're not coming through the appropriate channels, and that's going to cause issues to the American economy and American workers and all these things, which is, not being discussed here in this interview. That there's a immigration crisis for lots of reasons. The humanitarian aspect, but also how it's going to affect America.
We have done is we have united children with their families as they've come across the border. But one of the things is we don't know yet where those kids are. We're trying like hell to figure out what happened. It's almost like being a sleuth, and we're still continuing to try like hell to find out where they are.
So you've lost thousands of kids. Is that what you're saying? You don't have them? Like, you don't even know where they are? I mean, what, well, that's not good.
You've said to migrants, don't come. You said don't come. You're very clear. Or would you tell parents in Central America and Mexico, don't send your kids?
Absolutely. And look, here's the deal.
So don't send your kids. That's the message.
Do not send your kids, period. They're in jeopardy making that 1,000-mile trek. And so what we're doing now is we're going back to those countries in question where most of it's coming from and saying, look, you can apply from your country. You don't have to make this trek.
Federal investigation.
Again, they're never going to receive that message because when you're living in a foreign country, you don't have access to MSNBC and CNN. Many of them don't even know what Biden even looks like or Trump looks like, right? They're in a completely different sort of, ability to absorb media. And so what they see is that their country's falling apart and their kids' future is bleak. I mean, how bad is it how bad are you off as a parent that you would send your kids across a desert? Like, Americans wouldn't even think about something like that, right? Sending your kids off, 1,000-mile. I mean, if you've ever been to these deserts, in America, like in Utah and Nevada and Arizona, they're beautiful places, in all these areas. But if you don't have a bottle of water and you get caught in the sun, it's like life-threatening. I used to talk about when I was, we came back from India. My family was in India and it got up to 110 degrees in places that we were at. It was always, the heat was an issue. And I was like, well, When we went to Nevada, it wouldn't be an issue because India's hotter. And then I was in a parking lot in the middle of summer, like in a Walmart or something, and it was, one of those black parking lots that radiated heat. Like you could see the heat coming off, the waves of heat coming off. And just walking from my car to the store, my air-conditioned car to the air-conditioned store, I was like, this is almost like life-threatening. I felt like dizzy, right? It was, so hot. And so speaking of hot, this guy's face melted not so long ago. But anyways, they've been sending their kids across that kind of desert. Those deserts are even worse there. And so, JoJo saying, oh, don't come. That's going to be enough. Like, come on. Like, this is ridiculous. Anyway, let's hear about Giuliani.
Investigators searched the home and the office of Rudy Giuliani as part of an investigation into his time as President Trump's attorney, his dealings with Ukraine. Were you aware of that raid before it happened?
I give him my word I was not. I made a pledge. I would not interfere in any way, order, or try to stop any investigation the Justice Department had underway. I learned about that last night when the rest of the world learned about it.
So this isn't about your crackhead son, Hunter Biden, at all, right? And his face, like, look at this right here. I mean, bro, like, you're not making it, buddy. This guy's got, like, almost 4 years left.
Have you been briefed on any other investigations involving?
And I'm not asking to be briefed. I'm not asking to be briefed. That's the Justice Department's independent judgment. This last administration politicized the Justice Department so badly. So many of them quit. The Justice Department is the people's lawyer, not the...
Yeah, but it's just, a coincidence that they're going after your arch nemesis's lawyer who was going after your son. Rudy Giuliani went after JoJo's son. He was the one who had they had this, the hard drive that had all this incriminating evidence that nobody else published but the New York Post. And, and Hunter basically admitted it was his hard drive. He said it could be, I don't know. And he's got a crackhead son who's been doing illegal things and has questionable dealings and made a lot of money while smoking crack, right? Had prestigious positions because of his dad while he was smoking crack. You can't hold a job and smoke crack, right? You can't show up to work. You can show up to work a little bit stoned, many jobs. You can show up to work, after having a few drinks. You can show up to work and do some coke or things like this, right? Certainly caffeine and things. People are on drugs like that. You can't smoke crack and show up for work. You can't take one hit of crack and show up for work, right? I mean, it is a powerful drug. You can't, have fentanyl and do your job. And so people look at you like, what's wrong with you? You can, maybe pass off being under the influence of other drugs, but not crack, right? And he was doing these jobs while being on crack because of his dad. And now, the guy who was, most pushing some sort of investigation into Hunter Biden and Joe Biden's dealings in the Ukraine is now had his house raided and he's being targeted. This former, mayor of New York City, America's mayor, remember? Like he was a hero, in 2001, and now he's being targeted for investigation. But JoJo has nothing to do with that. It's just your enemy and your enemy's lawyer, right?
The president's lawyer.
We should note that Rudy Giuliani responded to that overnight, saying whether President Biden knew or not, he is being unfairly targeted as well.
The guy is named Craig Melvin. I had the Melvin part. See, here's the thing. I'm not a big fan of Rudy Giuliani, but where you see a difference here is that Trump promised his voters, his supporters, to lock her up, to go after Hillary. But when he was elected and they were trying, right after his victory in 2016, he was at a, like a rally and they were yelling, lock her up. And he said, no, that plays during the campaign, but not now, not so much now. So he chose not to go after Hillary for whatever reason, or his handler told him no, or it would mess with his agenda as he wanted to make his presidency about him, whatever reason. But part of it was that the intelligence community that Trump went to war with shortly after being elected And, remember Chuck Schumer was giggling about how they were going to get back at him, which they did. And the rest of the government, these were institutional people who have been working in the institutionalized government. They're institutionalists, right? They've been working in the governmental institution for most of their lives, career politicians and government employees. They weren't into Trump being president. They didn't like him. He was an outsider. He was going to shake up the status quo, which they didn't like, and they resisted it. And so with JoJo, one of the things about electing JoJo was he's a career politician, and he was going to put things back the way they were, even worse than before Trump was there. And so they're much more cooperative with him. And so if they know JoJo wants them to investigate Rudy Giuliani, he doesn't have to go order that. He doesn't have to put it on Twitter like Trump. If he didn't want them to investigate Rudy Giuliani, he wouldn't be investigated. Like, that's just common sense. Like, it's obvious. And so he has plausible deniability. But the problem is that the status quo wasn't working. Not that what Trump was doing, because Trump was, kind of a disaster on lots of levels. Like, we didn't see it till really after the election, and when he started to lose it and tweet and say things like, "How this is no way to run a government." Remember, he had that tweet, and so he just kind of exposed that he wasn't really in control of very much. That Trump was a president in a Twitter forum. He had the position of presidency, but he wasn't able to get things done because he never really figured out how the government really worked, and they didn't want him. Like, the people that were in charge of the government, like, there's hundreds of thousands of people working for the government, and they didn't want Trump. They didn't want to work for him. They were resisting him as president, and then the media and everybody else. So Trump had very little power. What Trump had was very fervent support from about 20 to 30% of Americans who loved him and really loved him. Not just, they voted for him because they didn't like the alternative. They loved Trump. They were Trumpers, and there still are a lot of Trumpers. But Trump exposed himself, and then after the Capitol riot, when he bailed on the people that he, brought to the Capitol, you could see the weakness in his character, right? And one of his weaknesses was if somebody praised him, whatever group praised him or whatever people praised him, he adored, and if people insulted him, he went after. Like, that was his. And you see this all the way traced back to The Apprentice and his time, as a public figure. If people praised Trump, he would love them. But if somebody criticized him, he would attack them with everything he had. Lawsuits, on the media, whatever it was. He just went full out, like Rosie O'Donnell and people like that. But in terms of Trump as an outsider, it's what people wanted, because people could see that the status quo in Washington, D.C. isn't working. And JoJo is the ultimate in status quo, 47 years in Washington. And it's his only real job, because he got elected when he was in his 20s, like 29, as a senator. So he went, right into D.C. at a young age, and he stayed there. And he's losing it mentally, and he's just a mess. And, that stuff's going to come around because it wasn't working before, and it's going to work even less now. And so returning the country to this, and the way the internet is, and people are just more conscious, and there's a spiritual awakening. Like, there's truth that's being pulled out to the surface that goes beyond the internet. People are changing. It's not necessarily manifesting in truth right now, but they're not accepting of the official story. Whether you're awakened, whether you're woke, whatever people want to look at it as, right? That whatever, phraseology that's there, and whatever your particular group's point of view is, people aren't accepting the official story anymore. So there was a meme yesterday about the Oscars ratings. It was like, 40 million 10 years ago, and then 10 million this year, right? It's down significantly, and it's down 58% from even last year. And so the meme said that people are waking up. Like, people just don't care about Hollywood anymore. And when there's some sort of upheaval or resistance or revolution in a country or the world, The first part of it is restlessness and dissatisfaction. And so you might not get to the truth right away as a collective group or as an individual, but it's the restlessness and dissatisfaction that makes it happen, right? That makes change happen. You can be in a relationship or a job that sucks, but you don't want to, you're fearful that it could get worse, or you just don't feel like you have the energy to find a new job or to be alone or whatever it is, right? And so at some point, the restlessness and dissatisfaction and the anger and the negative feelings you have outweigh the fear of change. I mean, that's how it always goes. That people are, well, I'm happy enough, or I'm satisfied right now, or whatever it is. I don't want to rock the boat, right? Whatever it might be. But then something changes, and your dissatisfaction or the collective dissatisfaction outweighs the desire to keep things going the way they are. And that's what's happening right now. People are restless and upset, like internally across the board. People are, freaking out, and they don't know why, and they're not really understanding the truth of the matter, but they just know that they want change, and their restlessness and negative feelings outweigh any fear that they have of change. And that's, why the system's going to come down. There's no stopping that, because people want change even though they don't know what that change is, and they don't even understand what it's going to take for them to have the change be healthy, right? Or at least positive. Because right now, there's only one way that's going to change, and that's in terms of your material world. Your spiritual world, things can immediately get better. If you connect to God, the heartfulness meditation that I'm talking about all the time. It is a way to develop spiritually right now by embracing an internalized relationship with God and cleaning off these, negative samskaras, these impressions and things, spiritual grossness, and connecting to God on a deeper level. And that can happen anytime a person desires. You can grow spiritually anytime you want. And when things are bad, it's like, when people say when things are good, bars are good. When things are bad, bars do great, right? It's the same thing with spirituality. When things are good, you can still connect to God and things, you can move forward spiritually. When things are bad, you move forward epically, right? In huge leaps and bounds. So spiritually right now, anybody can advance. But materially, things aren't going to be as good because people just, the system's played out. People are unhappy, even with all the wonderful things our materialistic system has, right? The internet, travel, just all of it. Like all the things that we have now on a material level compared to how hard people used to have it. But if you go and talk to most really rich people, especially generational people, look at the royal family. They're, maybe one of the richest families, the richest family, and they're miserable. All those really rich people are miserable. Very seldomly will you find a happy, wealthy person. And so that tells you, and especially the wealthy and famous celebrities, they're miserable. They're in therapy, multiple therapists. They're on psychological medications just to cope. And they're supposed to be, everyone wants to achieve wealth and fame. Most lottery winners are miserable. And so wealth and fame don't produce what people think, which is happiness. They just, produce the opposite effect. And so when that's the case, when everyone thinks that, the next iPhone or the next whatever it is, right? Materialistic things that are going to happen are what make you happy. And because of COVID, because of all the things that have gone on the past year and just all of it, people are kind of realizing that they weren't even happy beforehand. And whether they're that conscious or not, because, who knows what their reasoning capabilities are, people are having this feeling of dissatisfaction because their soul has been longing for a long time to have a deeper relationship with the divine, and people are being prepared for the inevitable collapse of the system, whatever that means, whatever period of time that takes. And JoJo, like this, the media and celebrity coverage of JoJo I mean, the beast is covering JoJo like he's a great man and a great president, and people can look at him and go, no, he's not, right? I mean, he doesn't have real fans. He has people that were conned into thinking that Trump was the devil, and so they are happy with JoJo. And they think JoJo is going to solve problems and that Trump is the problem, and so JoJo is the solution, and he just isn't. And so, only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Romano, definitely reporting from the Apocalypse and the Ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.